Hello to all. It is JT here with JT Invests in You, and today we have a wonderful show. We have guest Sinjin David Jung, who is a wonderful builder in this space. I want to give a warm welcome to him. He was one of the earliest builders in this space and even launched one of the first ASAs, ARC. Sinjin started the Asia Reserve currency coin, WagMI Swap, and QMG Labs. So without further ado, let's bring on Sinjin. How you doing, Sinjin?
Great. How are you doing, JT?
I'm doing terrific. I appreciate you coming on the show.
Oh, thanks for having me. You're always super informative and super active, so real honor to be on the show.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I try to do the best I can. When I first started here, I never originally intended to be an Algorand specific channel. It sort of happened that way. I just wanted to start a general investing channel, and then Algorand piqued my interest, and I saw a lane because the space was still so early and so new, and there was a lack of
Mm.
information. So, I'm really happy to do it. But, I really appreciate you coming on the show. And as you could hear with my original introduction, I do know that you were one of the original builders in this space with the ARC token. And I believe if it wasn't the first one, it was one of the first ASAs. Is that correct?
It was the first official ASA. We actually had um, signed a partnership with strategic partnership with Algorand even before they had launched mainnet, and then we were waiting for the ASA actually to launch. And we were like basically doing the design and the development of our own platform in anticipation for it. So as soon as it did launch, literally, I think about 2 weeks later, we had launched. ARCC ARC at that time, and in the wallet we were the first official verified ones. Yeah,
Awesome. Well, if you could just give a quick, brief, background on yourself and then how you got into the blockchain space, and then we'll go from there.
yeah. I've been in gaming for the longest time, like 1999. Samsung World Cyber Games, the first global like esports thing, and esports in Korea as well. But aside from that, I was at PricewaterhouseCoopers and the Korean government as a technology negotiator.
Okay.
Yeah, and then Price Waterhouse business negotiator, and on the regulatory side as well. And I got scouted by a company called Poker Stars, and they were growing internationally very big because they had kind of gone into this entire global market after 2005. In the U.S., online poker was all about party poker and Poker Stars, and it was just ripping it. And then they passed something called the UIGA, the Unlawful Internet Gaming Act, which was really interesting because it banned like all forms of like online gaming except for fantasy sports betting, right? Which has massive implications later on to this particular day, even very quite recent with all like the openness of online sports betting nowadays is actually coming back from that 2005 act, which was slipped in there like very last minute. And so they were looking for someone to kind of take over the Asian operations because nobody knew what poker was at all. They just everyone was playing baccarat. Macau had opened up investments in Singapore, and I had worked in Price Waterhouse doing casino investments and looking at the regulatory space. So there wasn't very many people qualified, and so as a management consultant, your next stage is usually to go for an executive. And I said, why not? It's interesting, and a lot of pro gamers became pro poker players, and they're the ones that really started that trend of doing not playing against like one table against one table, but like playing 20 tables at one time. You know, and so it was a crazy time. I ended up moving to Macau. I ended up legalizing poker in Macau, which ended up kind of cascading and setting up the regulatory region for the rest of Asia. I ended up leaving in 2010. I started doing advisory work, and I ended up with the family office in the Philippines. Ended up like managing a seaport, airport, broadcast licenses, and ultimately an e-money license for the Philippines, which I had a significant share in and founded. And it was a national license, and so Alibaba was looking to and financial IPO back in like 2018 ish. But that was the year of the unicorns. But anyways, they were on this massive buying
Yeah.
spree, and they bought our company, so I had a good exit there. And they didn't end up IPOing. They ended up raising like unicorn, massive style, billions of dollars, anyways. And then I got into crypto, and I think the biggest thing for me getting into it was when I had understood that there could be fully decentralized structures. Um, And me being a Gen X, or nowadays just the generic boomer, it blew me away because, yeah, if you're from like the Cold War era, you basically actually have these kind of not libertarian thoughts, but just general equality, egalitarian thoughts of like, how can we make the world, um, solve certain structural issues? And a lot of us from that generation basically gave up because when the Berlin Wall fell, we're just like, okay, capitalism won, and then hopefully capitalism plus democracy is going to make the world better, and it really hasn't. In some ways, yes, it has in terms of overt like human rights, but in terms of wealth inequality, it hasn't. And being in the casino poker space in a very very um, cutting edge way because of technology, I also had kind of issues that even though I was on the investment or the management or the business side of things, I wasn't actually taking bets directly. I could see how very clearly that my actions in that space could have added definitely to the hedonistic aspects of capitalism. So I was like, okay, let's do microfinance because working in Southeast Asia, I realized that there was a lot to do, and I thought through crypto that would be the way to do it. So I spent a couple of years um, you know, studying again on the micro and macroeconomic side of things, and then look to apply all that knowledge into creating kind of a reserve currency that was for lower income people, that was kind of direct to them. And that's how ended up partnering with Algorand, because I thought going through everything that they were doing, that they were going to be there for the long term, and it was going to be really really solid rails. And so that's where I ended up, and that was May 2017. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, you make a great point about, for all the pros that capitalism has. I mean, it is true that even ever since this quote unquote democratization of wealth that began, with things like Robin Hood and so forth, wealth
Mm.
inequality has actually gotten worse and not better. So you do make a great point there. Let's start off with the first project you launched on Algorand, the Asia Reserve Currency Coin. What was
Mhm.
the original intentions behind that project?
It was supposed to be kind of like the IMF of crypto, and um, for whatever reason, I got in my mind that I was going to do this, and I think I needed the motivation to really do it after I had such a good exit. And I thought, I want to get the Nobel Peace Prize, and so I'm like, okay, fine. What am I going to do that's going to be the most significant thing ever? And that would be to make this kind of global support fund, but directly for individuals. So the IMF, International Monetary Fund, was established after World War II, and it was meant to bolster institutions in terms of creating economic institutions that would create confidence and allow countries to absorb investments. But it's very top down, right? So if there's an economic or meltdown or whatever like that, whether it's in the EU or Greece, or a country's going to default on their sovereign debts or whatever like that, the IMF will come in and they'll negotiate with the government and say, we'll give you this money, but you need to make these kind of structural changes. But a lot of times those structural changes will impact the people directly, that had nothing to do with these macro government moves or policies. It's very hurtful. Whereas I thought, what if we did the opposite? We did something where, yeah, we deal with economic issues, but we are able to directly support individuals instead, and make it top, like bottom up. And so that if we were able to give everyone debt free capital to be entrepreneurs to solve their own local problems themselves, wouldn't that be a more efficient approach? The only issue though is that um, I think in theory it works, but the scale at which you need to approach it, especially the model that I had picked at the time, was again like this kind of crypto reserve model. But things like DeFi and DEXs and collateralized lending didn't exist in 2017 in a big way at all until I would say probably 2000, the summer of 2020, when things really started taking off,
Yeah.
the Uniswap and so on and so forth. So the theories that I had practically were very difficult to implement. And then also the concept itself was, when I didn't realize it at the time, because I was thinking like, wow, like decentralized everything is like world changing. And I think like you had 90% of the people thinking decentralized everything is great because now we can 20x everything. And so there was this massive disconnect with the market. And so we plugged away at it, but it was self-funded, and we had Algorand support. So I was hopeful that things were going to work out, and they just kind of moved along. It was a really hard slog, actually.
Yeah, yeah, it's a big endeavor, and you make a great point about the IMF. I mean, we're seeing that sort of with El Salvador currently, where they're, we'll give you money, but you have to bend to our demands, which is basically get rid of Bitcoin, and they're not going to do that, so
Yep.
they're not going to give them any money. So why did the Asia Reserve Currency coin pivot into QMG Labs?
So we had some marketing things where we were gonna, like, now that we had kind of the system set up, we had a reserve at the time. It was to over 2 million algos and so on and so forth. So we are ready to go, and the project was super not sexy. And our plan was to work with NGOs on the ground or partners on the ground, but unfortunately, our timing for our launch was smack in the middle of the pandemic, and so the
Yep.
NGOs, they couldn't do very much. In fact, they were like, "Can you help us?" And we're like, "Okay, let's try to help each other." But the other part of it was that there wasn't really any effective channels for us. And even working with the NGOs, they're like, "Okay, you're doing crypto, so there are a lot of hoops to go." So we're like, "What is a target market or channels for us that kind of work?" And lo and behold, I think it was May, we saw and started learning about Axie Infinity, and there's a documentary that came out. I think it was in June, about Axie Infinity Play to Earn, and it was the exact same target market as we wanted. So we invested 300K. We threw up a scholarship that's like a kind of play to earn kind of rental of Axies for a target of like 300 scholars. We ended up getting to about 240 scholars, and the amount of hype and interest of our scholarship, and the amount of marketing we were able to actually do was, I don't know, like 30 times more responsive than everything we had been doing for the last 2 years in the microfinance space. And we're like, this is fantastic. And so when we were doing our beta testing, we had only gotten like 1,000 beta testers in like 2 months of like our soft launch. And then after we had gone and kind of promoted through the Axie Infinity channel, we got 9,000 signups in
Wow.
a month. Yeah. So currently, right now, we have like close to 20,000 signups since the relaunch. But basically, because of Axie Infinity, we ended up with 18,000 signups in like the 3 months before we decided to do the pivot. And we decided to do the pivot specifically because we realized, hey, it's the same target market. Um, and I think if we package it in this kind of GameFi thing, we could still accomplish what we want to do, which is ultimately just provide debt-free capital to people who are willing to invest it in some kind of entrepreneurial activity. And I think, what's really accessible is gaming, right?
Yep.
And so we've just pivoted in that respect.
That makes complete sense to me. So what exactly is QMG Labs, and what problem is it solving?
So QMG Labs, so QMG stands for Quantum Meta Gold, and it's basically the ultimate macro gold. And I think what that means for us is, ultimately what is capital for? What is trading for? And it's like the allocation of capital, like the proper allocation for investment, not for like spending and not for just personal, how do I say, usage, but capital to invest, whether it's in infrastructure or businesses to create jobs, to create stability. And so in the gaming world, we want to be that kind of tour de force in providing this capital directly for gamers. So we're not a guild, and we want to create this kind of Web3 infrastructure at our level. I mean, I'm not looking to actually, I say, dominate or like, create it for everybody, but like insofar as our scale is. And our mission is just to empower Web3 gamers to learn about what Web3 GameFi is. And, there's all these terminologies. I'm going with the terminology flow, and GameFi is one of them. Is kind of gaming and DeFi, and how do you take the gaming assets and then kind of leverage them, or kind of accelerate the impact of it through DeFi. So before in gaming, you'd have your assets that are locked inside the game, but now because you can basically trade those virtual items or gold on crypto markets, then you also engage in all those other tools. But because they're generated through the game, and the revenue that's generated there, there's a lot of opportunity that everyone can come in not just as a trader like they do in DeFi, but as a gamer who is playing, providing utility to the game, and then taking those assets. And but what I found was that um, much like everything else, I mean, have you ever seen that movie Ready Player One or read the
Yes.
book?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you have the 101 corporation that basically like enslaves everyone into debt, and that's what play to earn started becoming like, in my view, anyways. And maybe because I'm again a Gen X kind of cynical guy, um, that people were locked into these scholarships, and they were generating money, which they thought was great money, but they were not reinvesting the money into their own assets or their own guilds. And so that's the main thing we want to kind of correct. And I think it falls exactly in our original mission. And so pivoting towards this from ARCC to gaming, it's just I would think it's a sexier channel, but the effects are the same, and we're specifically using gaming rather than kind of going through the microfinance route.
Now, what type of products will QMG Labs be launching on the QMG.finance website? It's mentions a gamer launchpad. Could you speak a little bit more to that?
Yeah, so when we talk about launchpads in crypto space, we talk about like product launchpads, right? Where we're launching a product and then we're offering an IDO or a private sale, and then people can ape in and then provide, yeah, for this project, which has a white paper and hopefully docs personnel, and then they invest and they build the product out. For us, we want to invest in it's a launch pad for the player itself. So if you're a web
Okay.
2 gamer or you're a web 3 gamer and you don't really have assets to actually buy the NFTs to play the games, then we want to like educate you on not just the games themselves and the ability to actually buy these NFTs, but we want to expose you to the greater crypto market, and what does that mean, and then actually have exposure to the gaming tokens. So QMG Finance, the way it works is you do some surveys or you do some educational material, and then you get awarded QMG on the site. Then the QMG you can use in like three ways. You can just hold it in your account, and then you can participate in a weekly draw where you can get free QMG, or you can use it to trade in our on platform wallet. So you can buy Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever, or you can joint stake it with us in governance tokens like AXS or Illuvium or something like that, or Sand. Those will be coming out more. We have the AXS one up, and then you lock it in for like a month period, and then you'll get the APY that we're getting through our own investments. And how we're able to do this and make this model work is that we ourselves hold Bitcoin, Ethereum, and um, these governance tokens, and we put them through these staking rewards, and then we allow the platform to share in about 10%, 5 to 10% of our own current investments.
Yeah.
And the other thing though too is that when you actually want to cash out the the tokens, you have to convert it back to QMG, right? And then we also have a vesting schedule on that where right now it's like you can only cash out 2% of your total QMG that you've earned on the site. And a reason for that is because we want people to actually grow the QMG. It's not for your Starbucks or your whatever. We really want you to buy gaming assets with that, or any kind of assets. I mean, in the end, I mean, nothing's for free. I mean, we're giving you the QMG specifically so that we could grow user base, but the type of user base we want are ones that will take the QMG, bring it to WagMI Swap, cash it out for algos or USDC or whatever, or ETH, and then buy the gaming assets with that. Yeah.
That makes complete sense to me. And the ARC token, that will become the QMG token, is this correct?
Yeah, so it's being swapped 1 to 1. So right now the circulating supply actually is 888 million, and but there was a kind of reserve supply of 86 billion,
Yeah.
and the reason why was because when I first made this, and if you look at the white paper, it's still up there on the original site, ibmr.io. We had a 68-year monetary policy with a 7% inflation. So if you take 888 million and then you do 7% inflation, it'll come out to 86 billion. But um, obviously, those were very ambitious theoretical dreams and structures
Yeah.
that the market actually has no appetite for. right? And so, uh, the tokenomics back then were a lot different, and I think uh, not necessarily being an academic, but approaching it in the way that I was, not as a kind of trader or degen or short term, but really, literally wanting to kind of change the world. And I was thinking of like, okay, I'm setting up ARCC not to compete with the existing microfinance things, but to compete with IMF. I mean, that's the kind of scale that I was looking at. And from my career and my background, having worked for the Korean government, advised like even the Chinese government legalizing stuff, and with the Macau government, and at that time, PokerStars was one of the leading Web 2 gaming companies. We were generating like 3.2 million a day, which was unheard of back then. This is like the late 2010s, whatever. Like, I mean, like 2005 to like 2000 whatever 15 or whatever like that. I mean, we were, it was not like crypto where like now you make like $8 billion in like 8 months. I mean, back then this was like amazing amount of money, right? Like
I,
three
I
million
would
dollars a day.
I would take either of those figures.
Yeah, our profit margin was crazy. It was between like 81% to 89%. We had like 90%
Yeah,
market share in some markets. So at scale, like I've operated at that $1 billion corporate scale, and so I was like, okay, let's kind of compete at that level. But again, it didn't work out. So getting back to like I guess the practicality of it, we're going to do a one-to-one swap, and that means that the current supply will just be 888 million, and that's it. So people don't need to freak out on tiny chart. But ironically, funniest thing is that once it launched on, we had to make up a pool because people had ARCC, and when Tiny Man launched, people were selling ARCC like one for $2, right? One token for $2, and our launch price was 8 cents, right? So I'm like, this
wow.
is ridiculous. Yeah.
Yeah,
So I reached out to those people who had bought for $2 and I reimbursed them and stuff like that. And then we put up a pool. Um, and it was funny because then Tiny Charts picked us up, and then people were like, this is BS. Like their market cap is like, yeah, like
huge. Yeah,
99 billion or whatever, like
yeah.
whatever, 5 billion. But some people, they thought, wow, this is awesome. Like this is gonna be the real Asian like reserve currency, like SHIB for Asia, and then they aped in. It was like mind blowing, like,
Yeah, it
yeah.
sometimes I can't even begin to imagine some of the thoughts that go through some people's heads when they're looking at tiny charts. I do know that there was some confusion with the, especially the FDMC, the fully diluted market
Yeah,
cap with that token, but it does make complete sense, everything you just explained here.
yeah.
And there are some discrepancies on many tokens as well, maybe not to that
Hmm.
to that amount, but there are a lot of tokens, especially because tiny chart doesn't fully understand which tokens might be in a reserve wallet. So sometimes it just says all of them are in circulation,
Yeah.
even though they're not. But that being said, what is WagMI Swap and how does it tie into all of this?
Okay, so WagMI Swap is a AMM DEX, and how it ties in is that we are using it as part of like the ecosystem where um, whatever we're pushing on QMG finance, whether it's giving QMG to the users, or partnering with other Web3 games and then using them, um, using WagMi Swap as later on we'll have an IDO function on it, but also providing the liquidity directly there. So we wanted to kind of make it a seamless kind of move because QMG finance is basically like a CX structure where it's centralized. So why are we able to offer all these coins and everything else like that on the system directly is because the user will earn the QMG, but the wallet itself is centralized. So it's just a centralized ledger where they're able to trade directly based on the price oracle of whatever Bitcoin is or whatever. But when they actually cash out, then they're going on chain. And then we wanted to provide them directly um, in an on-chain option of WagMi Swap. But the why we ended up with this DEX, I mean, if I could turn back time and re-engage this, I would have not made a DEX. It's just that at the time, sorry, I was going to bring this mic down. Um, at the time, there was no Tiny Swap, whatever like that.
Yeah.
Tiny Man. We probably started development probably about a month and a half after Tiny Man had started development. And when I first got into Algorand, I said, "Is there a DEX?" And they said, "There's a DEX solution coming. It's going to be imminent, no problem, right?" And I won't say which one that was, but it never happened. right? So here we are, we're building out all this other stuff. Everyone's building out these decks and stuff like this, and there's no decks. There's no decks.
Yep.
There's no decks. So finally, I'm like, I'm going to invest in any kind of decks there is, and then I find out there is no decks being made except for then I found out Tiny Man. Uh, I love those guys, but they ghosted me after our first call, and I ended up investing into Yieldly as I searched for any kind of DeFi thing, just to kind of help the ecosystem, because like
Of course.
as an early ecosystem partner, I knew where these rails were, and I was like, okay, I'm willing to support this, man, but just like
Yep.
let it happen. And then I had no faith in this was going to actually occur. And then I talked to my CTO, and we're like, okay, let's build this dex out. The process, though, is that even though we were about a month and a half, 2 months behind Tiny Man, we basically caught up. But when Tiny Man launched, they launched with um, uh, like point 0.9 AVM, or Teal, was it Teal? I guess 4 at that time. Like maybe it's Teal 5, Teal 4. And so, but the AVM 1.0 came out, and then we had our own code done, right? And then on point 0.9 as well. And we decided, instead of launching 2 weeks after Tiny Man, possibly, we were going to instead update our code to 1.0, right? And then we decided, okay, we're gonna actually start the development for the farms as well. But in order to do the farms properly, we had to wait for 1.1, right?
Yep.
And so uh, the this is the problem, is that it's not a problem, but my CTO is one of those CTOs that want to use the best, framework that's out there.
Of
And so
course.
commercially, we look like complete failures. And I have been putting money into this, trying to get to market. And our UX has been brutally terrible, whatever like that. But I'm happy that we're our contracts are all 1.1. Our farm contracts are done, and they're in the process of getting audited. And we finally kind of caught up. And I think a lot of people are like, now that you have the decks, now there's like 4, 5, 6 other decks out there, and I'm like, that's great. I'm
Yep.
happy. I'm really happy about it. But I think one thing though too is that one thing that's going to unlock a lot of activity on the dexes is that when the dexes actually have their own token, governance token, launched as well. And I think we're really early stages, because if people are talking about like, okay, this protocol has like 4 million TVL or 20 million TVL or whatever like that, this is a joke in Ethereum. You know, I mean, if we're talking about like competing in the ecosystem, then okay, fine. Okay, but again, I don't want to compete in the ecosystem. I want to make Algorand as big as Algorand can be,
Yep.
which means like looking at, what is Ethereum? I mean, and Ethereum is moving towards Ethereum 2.0, which is supposed to be basically all the things that Algorand already is, right? So it's ironic, right? But the narrative is that um, we saw the trilemma. So why haven't we kind of engaged in a much bigger way? And I think uh, one part of that is that Teal is responsible programming, okay, and a Solidity is not. But you can experiment like hell in Solidity, right? And the accessibility now is that they have libraries and libraries of audited contracts. Now, putting two audited contracts together does not make the third one audited.
Yep.
so,
Yep.
so that's where like the disconnect comes in. But like we're just not there yet. And I think once we have a portable system where we go from EVM to AVM, that's going to be a game changer. The bridge is going to be a game changer. Um, and so we're kind of there, but I think having these infrastructures in place, like a DEX, like the collateralized lending, more is going to be better, because at the end of the day, we should be aiming for not domination here, but domination in. Sorry, this is like Gen X terms. It was not dominating. I mean, we're all WagMI together, right? But like at least looking at that scale, right? And so yeah, I'm happy we've done it. At least that I know that um, we did it in a very conservative way. I think other dexes are very much anyone can list anything at any time.
Yep.
Our lists are curated. We have some innovations in the code where um, we want to make low liquidity pools um, stable. The thing with AMAs is that if you don't have a lot of liquidity, it shakes very easily, and it can be actually even exploited in that respect. So
Hmm.
one innovation in our code is that you can only do a maximum what do you call it trade based on the total liquidity. So it's 5% right now. So the maximum swap you can do is 5% of the total liquidity, right? So let's say some whale came in and they saw like a nice juicy pool for like that had 100K TVL, and then he started swapping at like 50, right? Per swap, like 50% of the pool. He could literally change the price in 3 trades, and then if the price is favorable to him, wipe out the pool, right? So you wouldn't be
Yeah.
able to do that. And we put a pause function in as well. So we have 24-hour monitoring on the pools, and essentially, if the pools start to get wacky, whether it's like bots that are trying to make the pool uneven, or if God forbid there's some kind of exploit, then we're able to pause the contract. But the pause only pauses the swaps, and then people who want to withdraw their liquidity will be able to do that. Right? Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you make a great point. I mean, I've experienced this before, just trading on some low liquidity ASAs where you make even a smaller buy and you see a nice decent sized green candle just based on the buy that you just made. So it is definitely a problem. It is nice to know that you're trying to fix that on at least WagMI Swap. Could you just briefly? It's kind of a broad question, but
Sure.
what does the future of GameFi look like to you?
I think GameFi is the future of Web3. So, like
Okay.
Web3, the terminology has been around for the last 3 years, and I know there are certain sites that have said like they're the internet of the future and so on and so forth. But um, I can't tell you what Web3 is in a different context, but I can definitely tell you what Web3 is in gaming. And, being able to have ownership of game assets as a gamer and then being able to take those ownerships. So they're cleaning windows here. And so my wife arranged this. Honey, could you ask him to change this window first or something else? Not this one. I'm doing the interview. Yes. Oh, there. Everything else is done. Okay, then I'm gonna move my screen over. I'm so
That's
sorry
okay.
about that.
Oh, no worries at all.
So you don't need to see the. Just give me 1 second. I'm sorry. This is not very professional in this meeting, but I'm going to do this. Maybe I'll go to my son's room. That'll be work better.
It's all right. We get a nice little journey.
Yep. There we go. This is my son's room, and we're off the main street as well.
It's kind of nice that you have everything pretty mobile. I could not just do that with my setup.
Oh yeah, no, no, not. I'm sure you couldn't do that. Sorry. This mic is very sensitive. There we go. It's my son's room.
All right.
All right. Okay. You know what? I'm going to also close the door. 1 second.
So yeah, thanks for
All
everyone for
right.
sticking to it. If you have any questions, just hit us up in the chat if you have any questions, and I'm certainly keeping an eye on them, and we'll try to get to those towards the end of the video. And we're
Okay.
back.
Okay. So what was the question again?
The question again was, what does the future of GameFi look like to you?
Okay. So I think that in 5 years, every single game will have an NFT component, right? Hands down, right? It just works. Whether it's your account or the ownership of virtual items or your characters. And then if it's character based, then those NFTs will be able to play multiple genre games. So imagine you had your Fortnite character and you were able to play Fortnite, but you were also play Dota 2, or you were able to play Mario Kart, right? And I think that's one approach. So you have like Board Apes Yacht, Board Board Apes Yacht Club,
Yep.
and like Cool Cats NFT and stuff like that. And they're going from that direction. So you have this NFT community, and then they're going to make games around that. And then you have games like Axie Infinity, where you have the game and then you have the NFT that's already integrated as a game character, or um, as some NFT that's really essential to the game itself. And what makes it different, though, specifically for Axie Infinity, is that you can breed the NFTs, right? And when you breed the NFTs, you get different traits, and then you take the combination of these different axes and create your own new party, and then you re-engage the game. So I think it's super exciting. It totally makes sense from a game perspective in terms of what gaming is, and then in terms of um, making money with the game, whether you're farming the in-game token and providing in-game player liquidity, so there's more players you can play against, right, and optimizing the kind of matchmaking that's possible. There's also the individuals who earn this in-game token. What are they going to do with it? This income. So instead of just kind of spending it again, you're automatically in the payment rails or in the DeFi rails of crypto, and then adding to it. So in crypto, if you think about it, like everyone says, okay, Bitcoin is wonderful because it only has a maximum supply of 21 million. Okay, but if you have like a MicroStrategy or Terra buying like 100 million or 200 million Bitcoin, it affects the price because
Yeah.
the liquidity is that low. So if you're talking about like massive institutions coming into crypto, like some teacher pension funds that literally have like $20 billion, and then they can deploy like $500 million into crypto, they would totally skewer all the prices. We don't have that kind of scale yet, right? But if we get gamers to adopt into crypto, and we get this kind of adoption, right, onboarding into crypto through gaming, I think that's like a really good transitional point into institution, because everyone's talking about institution, but the thing is, like, a lot of the investments that institutions get into are long-standing scaled businesses,
Yeah.
right? And people always kind of divorce this because they're like, okay, we're going to create this decentralized financial market, and then we're going to get institutional investors once we provide custody for them and transparency. But what are they investing in? you know Even the mortgage market, where we had the subprime meltdown, how were they able to get that big? Was because everyone has a mortgage in the United States, right? And if you can amalgamate all those mortgages, then you can create enough of a vehicle that could absorb this level of capital. So what I'm thinking is, GameFi definitely is by far probably going to be, for me, the killer app of crypto, hands down. And so, being from the gaming industry for, yeah, since like I guess 1997, for me this is like, like complete. So I was willing to transition everything over to GameFi and Web3 once, I guess my eyes were open. And
Yeah.
what's crazy is that if I had done ARCC and then launched it in 2022, it would have been much more like Olympus Protocol or something like that. But at that time, those tools didn't exist. Just the kind of idea of what it was. So, we have progressed light years in the space as well.
Yeah. Yeah. It's sort of an idea that was ahead of its time at the moment. When will ARC officially swap to QMG, and when will people be able to earn QMG on the platform by filling out surveys and other educational content?
So right now, you can earn QMG right now, but you can't withdraw anything at the moment. But the site is live, so we are now opening it up to content partners and to partnerships. So we wanted to launch it, but what I realized is the amount of content that we require on QMG is huge, right? And I don't have the content team to do it. I have a lot of staff right now. Actually, I have, off the top of my head, I think we have 10 management related community management staff, and like dev team, we have like 12 full time, right? But putting out all the content and stuff like that, it's a lot. It's all cutting edge stuff. So we're opening up to partners like guilds and other games, and then we're going to ask them to provide more content. But if you go on there right now, register, you can do 3 surveys, earn whatever QMG, and start mucking around with the site. So in terms of the swap, we're aiming for May 1st. We may have it done sooner. There were things that came up that I wasn't aware of. But when I had first announced the swap, they told me that some community members on Reddit told me that we have to kind of plan it properly because some people arbitrage the swap. So, like, if the QMG ends up being worth more than in an existing pool of ARCC, then people will swap back the QMG to the ARCC and buy it back, and so on and so forth. And then users get screwed on the exchange, and so on and so forth. So we're trying to make a very clear plan in swapping it properly. But at the very basic level, it's just literally going to be a swap page where they will put in their ARCC into the smart contract. It will lock it in, and then it will to the same wallet give you the QMG, and it's one to one, meaning that you know, the actual circulation is 888 million, and then that will be swapped one to one, right? I know there are some users who are like, well, do I get any other bonus for swapping it right now? And I'm like, no, but like the old supply was 86 billion, and now it's definitely just 888 million. So I think, at least on paper, there's some value there.
So the circulating supply will be 880 million at launch, correct?
Yep,
And
888 million,
what will the
800, no, 888 million, 800,000 and
a bunch of
eighty-eight
eights?
thousand. Yeah, yeah, a bunch of eights all the way through. Yeah.
So I'd imagine you also will have a total supply that will be a little bit larger than that, so you can reward people with tokens through time. Do you have a cap on the total token supply?
Oh yeah, the sorry, the total token supply is 888 million. The actual real circulating supply, sorry, I'm still working off like the tiny chart model, is closer to about, I think, 4 million tokens.
Ah, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the real like actual circulating supply is about 4 million. So yeah, it's all in there. I think I can bring it up myself under. Oh, I forgot my mouse over there. One second.
That's all right. I think that cleared it up. There was
Yeah,
just that little bit of confusion. So 4 million will be the rough circulating supply at launch, and then the total hard cap is about 888.
yeah,
Perfect.
yeah.
All clear.
Okay.
Now, this is basically my last question to you. Why did you decide on Algorand?
It's a really long story, but um, I was at Harvard Kennedy School doing my executive public policy specifically to study and kind of prepare myself for this microfinance mission. And I can't tell you that how many times I got laughed at Harvard for bringing up Bitcoin. But across Cambridge is MIT. And so every time that I didn't have classes, I would hang out at MIT and I would hang out with people from the MIT Bitcoin club, right? Which they didn't like me. They were very suspicious of this, boomer Harvard public policy guy who seemed to have a lot of spending money because I had this exit and, was always asking economic questions rather than more technical questions. Um, but during that course of the time, I did know about the kind of Bitcoin, Algorand. And actually, at that time, back in like 2017, I had met Chris Swiner from Reach.
Okay.
When he's always been a kind of leading force in the startup tech area in Boston. So I've known him from there, and we met through mutual acquaintances from MIT as well. So I was aware of Algorand and all the rest, and then we had decided to first go on Ethereum back in 2017, and we had the smart contracts done. And then I'm like, I can't go through with this because it doesn't make sense. Because if I'm going to actually reach out to millions of people, this is not going to work. The gas fees, even at that time, were just not great, and the amount of time that it was going to take was just ridiculous. It was like, I don't know, 12 transactions per second. It wasn't that back then. It was more like 8 or whatever. Not that 12 to 8 is a huge difference. Then we got a partnership with Republic Labs out in New York. Yeah. And they recommended Binance Chain at the time. And we were ready to launch on Binance Chain. And we had our kickoff meeting. But we had one call from Algorand during our kickoff meeting as kind of a courtesy call because we had kind of booked a meeting with them beforehand. And well, we said we were going to talk with them. And after the call, and we had it with a gentleman called David Markley, and he was head of business development at the time at Algorand Inc. He was so convincing that I said, okay, if they really can do all of this, and I knew about them from before when I was in Boston, that let's go up and see them. So I took my business development guy, and we drove up to Boston the next day from New York, and I met Sean, David, and Naveed, and I thought, hey, you know what, it actually has legs, and I talked with them, and they were like responsible adults. I don't mean to sound patronizing or ageism or whatever like that, but for me, coming from the background that I had, not being crypto native, it was kind of, it was for me kind of doing my own due diligence on it, right? And I was very concerned about like how these other chains were going to be perceived legally and regulatory wise. And I'm doing something that's going to compete with IMF. I want to be as kind of on the board as possible, and I felt Algorand fit that. But as well, I couldn't doubt the technology that they were going for, right, and what they were representing. Um, and then I came back to my dev team and I said, we are going to work with Algorand. And they were like, fuck. Sorry, excuse me. Like, what the fuck, right? We like did all this architecture, whatever. And we couldn't even architect at that time. So we went back and redesigned stuff really as a total centralized system, but that would, use Algorand as Rails. And the rest is history. But I'd have to say that, nobody thought at the time how much Ethereum would still grow. At
Hmm.
that time when Algorand launched, it wasn't like the L1s were all done and dusted. I mean, it was very much in the height of the L1 wars. Right now, things have settled down a lot. And I think the fact that Algorand can do a bridge, can look to do an EVM portable like kind of bridge or whatever like that, speaks volumes to the fact that Algorand has that has that robustness, right? And what's great, I like to always tell about this story is that um, when Algorand's Twitter started kind of blowing up the community, they were all trying to figure out what we should name ourselves. Should we be the Algorand Army, Algonauts, all this other stuff? And then um, there's I always get the name wrong, but Billard, the
Yep.
French fame token, and he just kind of was directing the space at the time, and he's like, Algo fam, because we are kind of like this kind of like family, and so I think in terms of it might make us more susceptible for rugging, because I think a lot of people who are in Algorand are coming from that they've tried Ethereum and they just feel like injustice that they have to pay that much fees, and they're looking for something reasonable. And Algorand is definitely that kind of thing for if you're more long term, more practical speaking, more reasonable. Then Algorand is definitely a chain that really is attractive to you. And so, I think we have a beautiful community. Unfortunately, a little bit naive at times in terms of all the rug pulling and stuff like that. But yeah, that's why I picked it, and I still fully believe in it in terms of the long term future. But for the gaming side and stuff like that, we've decided to go multi chain just because of the commercial side of it, and it's very. I'll be very transparent about it. Like the top. Assets that are being sold NFT wise on Algorand that are successful would be the minimum, floor price of a the minimally successful project on Ethereum or Polygon, right? So with those kind of economics, we had to kind of look towards a multi-chain moving forward. But that being said, I mean, once everything starts bridging over, I don't think it's going to make a difference later on in maybe a year or so.
Yeah, it makes complete sense. I mean, from a business standpoint, you have to meet people where they are. So, uh, that wraps up for the questions I have. There are only a handful in the chat, and we did sort of touch on some of them throughout this conversation, but I'll just let you tackle some of these. We've got Damian Brown asking, with this play to earn, is it like Zone where you earn the native token and sometimes earn algo as well? Will this just be earning algo? And I believe you touched on that. You'll be earning the QMG token, but I'll let you take it from here.
Yeah, it'll just be the QMG token itself, and that's it. And we do have the reserve funds, like from Cole Jane is mentioning it, and then from the reserves, basically, we're providing the backing the QMG with that, with about 10% of the yield that we're getting. So, like whatever yield we get, we share 10 to 20% with that to support the QMG token. Yeah.
Perfect, perfect. And we've got, I don't know how to pronounce this, but I guess this is a pretty general question. We've touched on this a little bit, but what's your general outlook for the crypto market? And is the narrative of the Ethereum merge going to potentially drive prices up? I mean, we don't have to speculate if you don't want to speculate, but
No, no,
I,
no. Yeah, I don't mind to tackle this. My outlook for the crypto market, I think, is that it's extremely positive because the technology continues to develop, right? And we continue to create the tools. But at the end of the day, what's going to drive everything isn't adoption, it's when adoption happens, right? And right now, if you have mass adoption right now, we will totally destroy this entire market because it will be a tulip, because it will 400x and then it will just implode,
Yeah.
because it can't handle it right now. So I think once we get stronger use cases like gaming that is able to absorb the capital and absorb the adoption, then I would say 5 years from now, I mean, it's absolutely a no brainer. And you can't deny. Here's the biggest thing is that when I had doubts about the crypto market back in 2017, 2018, and I was in at MIT hanging out and like being an annoying boomer, um, the students that I was talking to and the amount of brain power that was invested in there, I thought, damn, like these guys are not a joke. I mean, they see it as crypto native and they're developing it and they're putting this is too much brain power and it's not speculative. You know, it's very different. Like when you're at MIT and you're talking about Bitcoin and stuff like that, you're talking about consensus protocols. You're talking about like the actual nut and bolts about what is going on, block sizes, blah blah blah, so on and so forth. You're not talking about pricing, right? And so like you're talking about really high level math. You're talking about like zk snarks. Like you're talking about like um, how to do these certain new proofs and so on and so forth, or stateful or stateless, so on and so forth, right? Um, and then you're super bullish because you see like how much they really believe in it, but how intently they're kind of tackling it, right? But again, it's like people are always saying like when adoption happens, this is going to happen. It's different than a product. Like when adoption happens for microwaves, then the market will be this big. Okay, that's a product that it has to go into an existing market to replace it. This is a capital market.
Yep.
In order to have like mass people come in and make the prices go up, you have to be absorb that capital. This is the reason why you have massive funds that have like $10 billion, but they're talking to funds of funds and different organizations, like 100 different organizations, because one organization cannot absorb $10 billion. Right? If I have like a McDonald's franchise, I can't just give you $10 billion and say make money off of it. They can't absorb that. Even if you had 100 McDonald's franchises, you can't do that. So when I think like once we're able to absorb that, it's possible. It's a funny thing. I did my master's in divinity. It's a theology. So I was a seminarian theologian for a while, and I remember the funniest story was I was the worst youth pastor because I was like a heartless academic, and I remember this kid. He came up to me and he says, "Pastor Sinjin, I have this problem, and there's this girl. I'm praying to God every day for this beautiful girl to be my wife, and God hasn't answered me yet." And it's like snot nosed pimply kid, and I said, "Listen, kid, if God gave you the most beautiful woman right now, who's your perfect match, would you be able to hold on to her, or would you run away screaming?" And he's like, "She'd probably run away screaming." I go, "Exactly. So when you're ready for your perfect match, God will give you that perfect lady." And I think when the crypto market is ready for absorbing institutional money and adoption, to have that mass adoption, it's just going to come.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree, and I think patience is something that is tremendously lacking in this space sometimes, for sure. But I sort of echo those similar sentiments because I got my start in the space around 2017. I
Hmm.
rode that wave up, and of course, got burned on the way down. Started losing my faith in the ecosystem, and even took good like 6 to 12 months off, and just went back to investing in stocks and equities and what have
Hmm.
you. But I keep coming back to that same point too. Whether I mean, at this point, all my doubts are kind of by the wayside. But even if any point I have the smallest bit of doubts, it's like I'm able to talk to some of the brightest people that I've ever spoken to. They're all in this space. There are so many intelligent, like super brilliant people in this space. It can't be all for nothing. And it might be speculative on which project or token might do well, but I don't think it's no longer speculative if blockchain technology will do well.
Yeah. Absolutely. And the other thing that too, which I've gotten pushback on, but I have like pretty empirical proof on, is like people are like, I don't know, supply chain this and stuff like this, and tokenize all of real estate and stuff like that. And the reason why none of those really panned out, and my big thing is like, obviously IBM had created their entire blockchain division for that, and that doesn't exist anymore.
Yep.
And the reason why is the superpower of of crypto and decentralized finance is creating this liquidity upfront, right? In no other way can you create this liquidity, but liquidity based on what? Where's the inflow of funds? Where's like whatever? Because if you look at equity markets and stuff like that, it's an enclosed market. So like it's easy to go through the P&L statements and say, okay, look, this company's good, this company's bad. So Warren Buffett can do that because they're already pre-qualified because they generate revenue already, right? It's a certain type of company that's already made it to the S&P 500, or the Nasdaq or the LSE or whatever like that. And so we have to not forget that thing. But the thing is, it's a great illusion, um, or even thrill, to suddenly have this instant liquidity, whether it's from staking or whether it's from collateralized lending, then staking. But even with the governance rewards, you can only restake and collateralize 3 or 4 times on, let's say, AlgoFi, because the APY that you're getting from the governance rewards will cover that,
Yep.
right? And then where are the governance rewards coming from? Well, those are excess funds that are being given into the community, which is ultimately increasing the total liquidity, right? I mean, someone's got to pay for it, but once there is an inflow of funds coming in, then that's going to be the game changer. Where it's not just about creating liquidity, but creating liquidity for real growth and progress.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect way to end this conversation. Sinjin, this has been absolutely terrific. I appreciate you answering all of my questions and all of the audience questions and for coming on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. I mean, real big honor. I mean, yeah, just thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And everything you do for the community as well.
No, I appreciate that as well, and not a problem for having you on. You're more than welcome to come back anytime. Just slide into the DMs. Everyone that's watching, go check out Sinjin. Go check out all the projects we just mentioned today. And yeah, thanks again, Sinjin.
Cheers. Thank you.
Take care. Well, everyone, I appreciate you all for staying to the end of this conversation. Make sure to hit the like button. Make sure to subscribe. You're not going to want to miss a couple more conversations I have coming up. Coming up over the next month or two, we have AlgoMint founder Michael Cotton. We have the MetaPunks team. We have AlgoGems, A-Note Music, and Paul Regal, the Chief Product Officer of Algorand. I just landed that interview, so make sure you subscribe. You don't want to miss it. Take care.